Jordan Peterson hits the nail on the head so much of the time, but even he is human, and even he sometimes gets blinded by emotion. That's the case in one of his videos where he discusses crazy women, MGTOW, and the powerlessness of men to change their situation, specifically when it comes down to divorce and the nastiness of ex-wives and the court system. I'm Rachael Sloan. I'm a master NLP practitioner and a certified life coach, and I'm the creator of Better Beyond Divorce, which is a coaching program designed specifically to meet the unique needs of men after a divorce. Please stick around to the end of this video because after we talk about Jordan Peterson's take on this and where he went very astray, I'm going to give you one actual powerful thing that you can do to combat this victim-villain mindset in the world of relationships, particularly if you've gone through a nasty divorce. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, and if you would like to support me directly in making these videos, you can join, become a supporting member of the channel, which will also give you early access to all of my upcoming videos. So I like Jordan Peterson, I really do, and I actually find that he is an incredible source of strength and inspiration for a lot of my clients. But I recently watched a video that he did about MGTOW. If you're not familiar with that acronym, it stands for Men Going Their Own Way, and it is a group that's based around the idea that the world is really stacked against men due to toxic feminism. And now I can actually get behind some of the premises that these guys talk about. I do have some issues with how they deal with these problems. I think a lot of times they actually make the problems worse for themselves, but that is a topic for another video. You don't need to know a lot about men going their own way to see where Jordan Peterson missed the mark on his interpretation. If you want to see that video, you can watch it here, the one that I'm talking about with Jordan Peterson. In the video, Peterson describes how he believes that the courts and the legal systems are really stacked against men. And again, I can agree with him on a lot of counts here. But he takes it a step further. He says that men lack the tools that they need to fight back. And he describes how his wife told him, well, maybe men need to start standing up for themselves. And Peterson disagrees. He says men can't stand up for themselves in this case against crazy women because they lack the tools to do so. The tools that men have to stand up for themselves, to fight for themselves, can't be applied to women. Again, Peterson makes some fair points here, right? He says, look, this is how men fight, right? Men disagree with one another, and when they disagree with one another, the path of resistance is obvious, right? Jordan Peterson said a man talks, he argues, and then he pushes, and guess what? If things don't go his way, then it gets physical. And he claims that in every conflict between a man versus a man, that possibility of physical conflict is there. It's always the last resort, but men aren't allowed to use that last resort against women. And for Peterson, this poses a problem. It leaves men in a position where they don't have any tools to work with. His words, and I quote, are, "In a discourse with women, that is completely forbidden," that being the physicality as a last resort in conflict. And so he says, so I don't think that men can control crazy women. He goes on to say that this means men are, and again I quote, defenseless against that kind of female insanity, and that the solution is that sane women need to stand up to their crazy sisters and put an end to the man-hating, pathologizing narrative. His opinion is that men can't do much of anything to stand up for themselves, to defend themselves. Women are the ones who need to change the other crazy women out there. I have to say that I'm kind of disappointed in Jordan Peterson when he says this, because he is making the exact same mistake that many men in Men Going Their Own Way make. When falsely accused of being a villain, he turns the accuser into the villain and makes himself the victim. Essentially, he's saying, I'm not the bad guy, you're the bad guy. That narrative, though it may be initially emotionally satisfying, leaves men in a pretty shitty place overall. It leaves them victims, right? Powerless to change the course of their relationships, powerless to communicate with these crazy women in their lives. And it's not realistic. We do not live in a world of victims and villains. We do not live in a world of good versus evil. Come on, guys, we are not children. Life is not a Marvel movie. We live in a world of humans. And humans are flawed. We are afraid of pain and being alone. We develop defense mechanisms and coping skills from childhood that often do not serve us well in our adult lives. Right? We live in a world of humans, and the women that Peterson is calling insane are no more crazy than the men that they hate are actually narcissists. He may as well be jumping up and down and shouting, "Stop pathologizing me, you psychopath." The irony is so heavy, it's almost comical, but the repercussions are so tragic. Yes, the world is unfair. Our legal systems, our courts are flawed, and they often discriminate unjustly against men. There are real consequences because of this. But giving in to that good versus evil, us versus them narrative, it doesn't solve anything. It doesn't change any of that. In fact, all it does is contribute to the divide. It contributes to the conflict and this me versus you, victim versus villain mentality that is permeating so many levels of our society. And more importantly than that, it sucks to be a victim. Victims are weak. Victims are powerless to change their circumstances. Instead, they have to rely on other people to make the changes for them. That is a recipe for despair, for depression, for hopelessness. Do you really want to live the storyline of a victim any more than you want to live the storyline of the villain? I know that I don't. I can also understand where Peterson is coming from. He's frustrated, he's angry, he's sick of seeing men get taken advantage of, be unjustly discriminated against. I get it. I have the same frustrations in my practice when I see these things happening to my clients. And that's why I wanted to make this video, because look at Jordan Peterson. The man is so clear. He's so well educated. He's usually so calm and rational about these things. If he can fall into this good versus evil story, if he can fall into this emotionally charged trap, well, then you can, and so can I. So we all need to be aware of that and be vigilant. That victim versus villain story, it's so appealing emotionally. And it also seems like it provides a great solution, right? Just kill the bad guy, get rid of the bad guy. But unfortunately, once again, life's not a Marvel movie. It's not actually that cut and dry. It's not that simple. And in this particular video, Jordan Peterson let himself get caught up in that appealing narrative, that black and white story of victims versus villains. And he forgot for a moment that life isn't actually a superhero flick. I hope that you don't make that same mistake. So I'm going to tell you one thing that you actually can do when confronted with crazy women and the impacts that they might have on your life. The one thing that you can do is stop fighting physiology and really recognize and accept that when your nervous system is in an activated state, when fight or flight is active in you or in a person you're communicating with, communication is not possible. So Jordan Peterson is talking about men having this fight as a backup in any conflict. Right? Coming into a conversation that way might feel good. It might help you get certain outcomes, but it's really a negotiation and it is not a conversation. Right? Whenever there is that fight response, we are in an attitude of being in conflict against an enemy. And that enemy either needs to be converted over to your side or conquered in that conversation. Right? Maybe that approach works well for men in certain business negotiations or in other conversations with other men. It does not work well in relationships. It does not create intimacy and it does not create connection. Even when it works, it keeps you playing a role. Basically, it keeps you trapped in this role of tough, strong dude, which means your partner never gets to actually know you. Right? Your partner or a potential partner doesn't have a chance to connect with, to know or love you as you really are. So communicating that way, fighting that way, keeps you from ever actually having deep, intimate connection or being loved as yourself by a potential partner. It also stops you from knowing or loving or understanding another person. Because remember, when your nervous system is charged up, when it is in a fight or flight state, you lose your ability to communicate with others. You lose your ability to hear them. There's been a lot of research done on this. The parts of your brain that allow for relational contact, that allow you to read and understand body language, to discern different tones of voice and make sense of eye contact, and all of our relational parts of the brain that help us communicate and understand one another start to go offline when our nervous system gets activated into a fight or flight state. Basically, if you or the person you're talking to is in an emotionally charged state, if their nervous system is riled up, there will not be clear communication. And guess what buying into this whole victims and villains thing does? It charges up your nervous system, right? Being a victim sucks. There's a lot of emotions that come along with that. There's a part of you that wants to fight back, right? You're inherently pitting yourself against another person or against a system, and now it's me versus them, and you are necessarily going to be in a more emotionally charged state, in a more excitable nervous system state. And that means that communication can't happen, and you are never going to be able to talk to a crazy woman or even a sane woman, as Jordan Peterson terms them, when you're in that state. So it is my sincere hope that you won't let yourself get caught up into that emotional game, as tempting and as temporarily satisfying as it might be to view yourself as the victim instead of the villain. I hope you remember that there's a third option. That third option is that there are no victims and villains. There's just humans whose nervous systems are in a whole range of different degrees of activation that are impacting our abilities to communicate with one another. If you find these videos helpful, make sure you subscribe to the channel and go ahead and click the join button. You can support me directly in putting these videos out and also get early access to all of my upcoming videos.